All right, Nuggets fans, welcome into Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I am here. I am excited to talk about the Denver Nuggets as they once again win 129-115 over the Charlotte Hornets last night. Really impressive game in some facets, really unimpressive game in some other facets, but first game out of the break, it's always one of those dangerous ones that you never know how it's going to look. You never know whether they're going to slip up, but they didn't. They performed well enough, and they ultimately now sit at the 2 seed in the Western Conference heading into today. Pretty impressive for them to have worked their way all the way back in that regard. It didn't look like they were going to be that quality of team as soon as like a couple months ago, like maybe even 1 month ago, but they have fully formed it back and looking great. And it's just been a nice, kind of impressive way for them to turn things around. So good stuff here. We'll talk about Jamal Murray. We'll talk about Nikola Jokic, who I was surprised took as many threes as he did. We'll talk about Christian Braun starting over Russell Westbrook. And then we'll get into the power and pain of win streaks, which kind of speaks for itself in that regard. I'll let you know what that ultimately looks like when it gets to it. But really quick, we got to pay some bills. This podcast, as you know, it's brought to you by the good folks over at BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, they are your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA, college basketball, NHL, UFC, and more. BetOnline's got you covered. Head on over to betonline.ag to get started and make your first bets. BetOnline, the game starts here. Once again, I'm your host, Ryan Blackburn. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you can, would really, really appreciate it if you enjoy. Let's get into this. It was nice to be back at the arena, although not super nice because it got very snowy and it was a miserable experience trying to get home from the arena last night, but we move, we have a good time, and sometimes it's just how it is in Colorado, folks. Denver wins 129-115. The defense, of course, kind of slow on the get up. Yusuf Nurkic started last night for the Charlotte Hornets. That was definitely a weird experience to watch. So did Elfrid Payton, because two guys that had been factors in LA the previous night, LaMelo Ball and Mark Williams, they sat out. They are injury-prone guys. Charlotte's not going to play them on back-to-backs, I guess. And it was just probably the right call for Charlotte to not do that, because they're trying to lose games and they are trying to get another high pick because that's what's best for their franchise. So Denver didn't have that hard of a game. And Jamal Murray said at postgame, he said, this is probably going to be one of our easier games through the last 27 games of the season. And he's completely right about that. But Denver still had to do the work. They did take care of business. It was a bad third quarter for them, 38-33 for Charlotte. Not great when you're giving up 38 points to the Charlotte Hornets when they don't have LaMelo Ball on the floor. But they still did it. They still found a way to kind of power through it. And it was good to see Denver recover in that fourth quarter, led by a bench group that surprisingly had, like, it was great with DeAndre Jordan. And he was fantastic in this game. It was just nice to see him have another performance where you just get reminded how it looks when DeAndre is at his best, and the bench can look really good too. But in this game, the big stories, I would say, were Jamal Murray, 34 points on 12 of 18 from the field, 7 of 10 from 3. He was absolutely firing. It's kind of funny how plus minus works, though, because Christian Braun led the game with a plus 23 in the plus minus category. He was nowhere near as good as Jamal Murray was last night, who had 34 points and was extremely efficient. But Jamal Murray was a -5 in his minutes. What that says to me, honestly, is that if Jamal hadn't been as good as he was, then that minus number would have been way worse. So stuff that stands out there. Miles Bridges kind of attacked him a little bit. I thought that there were some guys that really took advantage. Surprisingly, Damian Baugh on the other side pretty good for Charlotte, and he made some impressive plays. But Miles Bridges, of course, was the big one for them. 36, 13, and 7. Like, that's a Jokic stat line right there, and it was put up by Miles Bridges. So good for him. Still a POS. But Murray was fantastic in this game, especially scoring wise. He was so confident and moving so well in this game that it's not really a surprise to me that he got to the spots and made the shots that he did. But just with the aggressiveness and definitiveness, like, if that's not a word, but he was extremely on point. And so often, I was thinking about this last night and kind of how I would frame this to Jamal. If I was describing his game for the first 20, 25 or so games of the season, it would have been tentative. Tentative was the word that I would use, because so often he would get to his spots or struggle to get to his spots and then not necessarily feel super confident and comfortable. He would do a lot of pump fakes. He would be doing a lot of extra stuff. Whereas in this last game, he didn't have a lot of fakes when he went out there. He just simply got to his spots and rose up because nobody could stop him. And that's what you're looking for when you're looking for Jamal Murray. You want to see him get to his spots quickly, make quick decisions, and be extremely aggressive. And Michael Malone said it last night, an aggressive Jamal Murray, when he is at that level, it's really easy to see how good he can be. And he makes it easier for the rest of the team when he is playing that well. So credit to him for taking that upon himself. 34 points in 35 minutes, 4 assists, did have a couple blocks, did have 5 fouls, and I think he was just a little bit overwhelmed by Miles Bridges. But there was one foul that he gave in the second quarter or so that I was like, why are you doing that? And then he got into foul trouble at late in the game. So sometimes it just works out that way. Nikola Jokic, ho-hum, 29, 17, and 9. Like, sure, like, of course, that's just how it works, I guess. Had a steal and a block as well, was a plus 14 in a game they won by 14 in 37 minutes. So, of course, that says exactly what you need to know. 11 of 14 from the field, 6 of 14 from 3, or 11 of 22 from the field, excuse me, and then 6 of 14 from 3. Kind of a wild disparity there. And it was so wild that, like, it was a record. Jokic attempted the very most threes that he's ever taken. Did I say Murray or Jokic? Jokic attempted the most ever threes that he's ever taken in a game at 14. Now, he previously set it at 13 earlier this season, so this seems to be a trend. Like, he's shooting better than he's ever shot before, and I think as a result, he's taking more and more shots. And last night, they were talking about, it was because Yusuf Nurkic was in drop. It was because Moussa Diabate was pretty short and was trying to cut off the paint and not necessarily getting up into his grill the entire time. I don't know if I'd buy that last one, but certainly with Nurkic, like, it seemed to me like Jokic was just taking what the defense gave him, taking as many threes as he needed to, and it looked very uncomfortable early, but you look at it at the end and it's 6 of 14. Like, you take that every single time. And was there some stuff that he kind of left on the table? Sure. He only attempted 2 free throws, I think, because he took 14 shots. And then some of the mid-range shots that he took and some of the shots outside of the restricted area, like, he didn't take a bunch of shots where it would be justifiable to actually give him free throws. So he made the 3 shots that he took in the restricted area and then missed 3 of the mid-range shots. And then the rest of his misses were threes. So kind of interesting to see if that breakdown from that perspective. But he was still dynamic, still doing Jokic things. And I'm not surprised, of course. Like, that's just what he does. It's how good he is. And it's very clear that when he wants to get into that rhythm as a shooter, he's capable now. And the Nuggets know that they have that in their back pocket. It's funny how he has adapted his game, whether it's Christian Braun on the floor, whether it's Russell Westbrook on the floor, whether it's Aaron Gordon on the floor or somebody else. That's not taking a bunch of shots from the outside. Like, Jokic has adapted his game so much that he can account for whoever he's on the floor with. If the spacing isn't perfect, he can be the spacing. And that's a big deal to me. That's a big deal for the Nuggets. So credit to him. He continues to adapt his game. Thought his defense was pretty subpar in this one, but like, look, first game back from the All-Star break, gets a pass from me. Like, that's fine. Michael Porter struggled, 2 of 11 from the field, but did have 11 rebounds. Michael Malone made sure to mention that in the post-game presser last night. So, like, at least you're doing something when you're out there. And he also passed to Jokic several times for a few assists. Again, he was also -8 in this game, a team low -8. I thought that Porter just looked uncomfortable out there. It wasn't just that he was missing shots that he normally makes. He was taking shots that he normally doesn't take. And kind of the 11-foot floaters and just the uncomfortable three where you feel like you have to force it up. But look, he got a couple dunks towards the end of his third quarter stint. And one of those was because Aaron Gordon really set him up nicely on a pick and roll where Porter set the screen and slipped. And then Gordon, because he's a threat as a shooter now, like just dumped it off on the slip cut. And Porter had a wide open dunk just that caused a timeout. So really great to see him be adaptable in that, but also great for Aaron Gordon in general. 18 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 8 of 13 from the field, 1 of 2 from 3. He continues to be pretty good on the offensive end. Again, another guy that I thought was pretty bad on the defensive end, but it's hard to really single out anybody on the defensive end because I thought across the board Denver's defense was pretty bad. Like I don't know if there was a single player who had a good defensive night, except for maybe Zeke Naji, and DeAndre Jordan also has a case there. But just interesting to see regardless. And starters looked pretty good last night when they were out there. But mostly the staggered lineup where Russ came in with Julian Strawther, Christian Braun was out there, and then Aaron Gordon and Jokic. That was a good group to have out there in the second quarter and the fourth quarter, I believe, that it played. And those groups were pretty nice. So glad to see them find a way, and just nice to see the team continue to keep up the streak. You want that to keep up for as long as possible. And you just never know when it could kind of fall out from under you. So as long as you're putting wins up on the board, that's what matters during the stretch. We'll talk about streaks in the next segment, but I do think that like Denver needed this one. If you want to get to 40 wins before 20 losses, you needed this one. You needed to find a way, and they found a way. They need 3 more wins to get to 40. Before 20 losses. And then at that point, you basically can do whatever the hell you want. You're still a contender because like you've gotten to 40 before 20. I think that's the rule according to Phil Jackson. So gotta love it there. But off the bench, so Russell Westbrook comes off the bench. I'll talk about him also in the next segment too. He played reasonably well. Nothing crazy from him. Julian Strawther, 16 points, 5 of 10 from the field, 4 of 7 from 3. Plus 15 for him in his 22 minutes. I think that it's going to be interesting to monitor how many minutes guys are getting in this particular 9-man rotation. Peyton Watson's not going to play for a while, but I think that this is going to be the 9-man. And it's so funny that Zeke Naji is just like part of that 9-man group now. It makes a lot of sense for him to be out there. He's at the 4. He's playing great defense. And I don't think Michael Malone ever fully considered playing him because he could have been doing it for a lot of this time. But Hunter Tyson was the guy that he would consistently go to instead of Zeke Naji. Now he's got the defense from Zeke, and he's a guy that can match up with some of these bigger forwards, whether it's Miles Bridges or Zion Williamson or I don't know, pick a name that he's faced over the course of these last few weeks. Zeke's really stood out and really played well. So good on him for being able to do that. He had a foot on the line, I guess, in one of the 3-point attempts that he had, but because I'm looking at it here, it says he's got 4 points. But I thought he hit a corner 3 in the first half. And so good on him for being able to make it happen. Ninoslav here says Banchero. Yeah, another guy that he actually played fantastic defense against Paolo. That's a good name to throw out there. And Raindrove says, if Strawther plays good, we typically win. I tend to agree. Like so much of the stuff from the game to game comes down to how your like bellwether players do. And like I think Strother can kind of be a bellwether player because when he is out there, the team's not counting on him to be great. Like they're not counting on him to be like 15 points, 4 of 7 from 3 and being a dynamic offensive force. Like that's not what they're thinking about. But when he is, it's like a really nice value add. And Denver's able to sort of incorporate that into what he's doing. And they can play him next to Porter and have some really great spacing, or they can play him next to guys like Christian Braun and Aaron Gordon, and you're getting pretty good defense. So, like, or at least some guys that can compensate defensively for you. So, kind of interesting to see. But yeah, Denver is at their best when Julian Strother is playing well because like he just gives them a little bit of a cushion for sure. And 42 Ultra says here, going to look great with the new eyebrows, Ryan. You got to own it, man. And I'm getting nervous at this point. Nuggets are making me nervous, man. It's gonna be it's a wild experience over here, but we'll talk about that on the other side. When we come back, we're going to talk about the decision to start Christian Braun over Russell Westbrook, as well as eyebrows, which in out of context sounds hilarious. We'll be right back on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we are back. Pickaxe and Roll. Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Appreciate the love and support on the podcast, folks. If you can, be awesome if you could rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts. Spotify does their reviews now. So if I see something come through there, I'll make sure to shout it out on the next show. Would absolutely appreciate that, of course. All right. Noah Linden in the comments says, Russ needs to start. Funny story, he doesn't. He definitely does not need to start. I understand why people think that he does, but there are absolutely ways for him to play all of his minutes with Jokic and not start anyway. He was a plus 17 in 26 minutes today, and he didn't even play that great. He was 3 of 10, 1 of 4 from 3, had 5 turnovers, so that his defense was pretty weak. But like he still made it work. And had 7 assists in 26 minutes and set the table for guys. And again, was a plus 17. The team was functioning really well when he was on the floor. I'm not going to use and the funny thing is that Christian Braun was a plus 23. So like whatever they did, it worked. And the context of it worked. I think that it's not set in stone that Russ is going to come off the bench for the rest of the season. Let me start there. But one of these guys has to come off the bench. It's not you can't start everybody. Jokic is going to start. Murray's going to start. Porter's going to start. Gordon's going to start. And you got to figure out, okay, does Christian come off the bench? Or do you bring Russ off the bench, which was the plan at the beginning of the season? I think that the fact that Russ has made this a conversation is a real credit to him. It's a real credit to how he has performed, to what he has done, to what he's contributed, and how he augments what the Nuggets do and how they play off of him. Absolutely. Especially with Jokic. I can understand why people want to see him starting. But I do think the best version of the Nuggets is going to be the one where Russ is the sixth man and playing the bench minutes with Jokic and probably not playing 30, 35 minutes. I think 25 minutes is the right number. I think that that's about where he should be. And as long as you're getting those minutes with Jokic, it doesn't really matter. Actually, before I'm gonna post the rotation chart from last night in the overlays because I want to show everybody what it looked like last night and how the rotation actually broke down, because I think it's a valuable exercise to see what this looks like. Okay. So everybody knows that this is what I do. Sorry, you're going to be talked to by a chart. Last night, Westbrook came in at the 6-minute mark of the first quarter, as you can see. Then Murray came back in and he ran the second unit. This is about what I expected to happen. Uh, that didn't work well in this context. Part of it was because Michael Porter couldn't hit the broadside of a barn last night. And like Murray was playing well, but Denver just wasn't getting great offense. He was kind of screwing some things up, and then Denver didn't defend well. Those minutes looked pretty bad. But then Russ comes back in, and they immediately kind of set the tone. And it wasn't just Jokic that came back in and set the tone. Russ came back in and immediately made an impact. And I think that that's what you're looking for. You don't necessarily want him to play the stretch like he played in the third and fourth quarter, although he made it work. That fourth quarter stretch playing with DeAndre Jordan, he and Jamal Murray still made some things happen. And that I think shows a couple of different ways that Denver can play him. They could either like stagger his minutes with Murray, like have Murray play a couple of minutes as the two like he did last night in the first quarter, and then come off the floor so that Russ plays and then come back on and they swap. Or you could have them play together at the beginning of the fourth quarter like they did. And that ultimately did work. It's not a guarantee that it does. Denver can play around with a bunch of different things. They can try a variety of different things. But what we've noticed and what we saw heading into the All-Star break, Christian Braun was playing excellent basketball. And Michael Malone said that was one of the reasons why he stayed in the starting group. He'd been averaging like 20 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists, or something crazy like that for the 8-game stretch. And he had been playing extremely good. But more than that, I think there's part of me is not wanting to. Russ is in his 17th season. He is supposed to be like an additive piece to what they're doing. Christian's somebody that they might pay $30 million a year to, like in the next year or so. And they're probably going to have to give him a big contract, or they're going to have to trade him. But like he's probably going to be a part of their future. And continuing to put him into a position where he is trusted, where he gets that valuable chemistry with Jokic, with Murray, like I think he is the right fit. Because when you've got Murray out there with Jokic, and then you've got Christian Braun out there as a cutter, as a defender, doing those things, I think it's really helpful for Denver. So we'll see what it looks like and how it continues to evolve. This might flip-flop. Like if Christian doesn't play that great, and then Russ is playing better, and it's pretty clear that Denver needs a jolt with their starting group, then Russ could start. Like I'm not going to write that off. But I do think that Michael Malone, he has a tough choice, but I think this is the right choice because Christian should be playing around 30, 35 minutes a night as that versatile defensive wing. Remember, in the final game before the All-Star break, he played 45 minutes because he's that trusted. He's somebody that Michael Malone loves to go to. He was playing such great basketball that you didn't want to take him off the floor. So like, let's keep it around. Like I think that we'll see what happens against the Lakers. We'll see what happens going forward in these next few games. But I do think that Christian has earned the right to be in this starting lineup. And Russ can still play all of those minutes with Jokic if the main reason why you're starting Russ is because of how he plays with Jokic. That's not a good enough reason to me. Because you can play a whole bunch of bench minutes with Jokic. Because the way that they run their lineups, Russ can still be out there with Jokic for almost 100% of his minutes if they really want to do that. So I think that they're going to be fine. I wouldn't overreact to it at all. But we'll see what happens. And I think that this is something where they've got to be adaptable. This is not going to be a final thing, but it's going to be interesting. Jim Dog says, Russ is like if you bring in a reliever who has a 98 mile per hour fastball. Teams get used to defending a certain rhythm. When you bring in Russ, it crosses them up 100%. Like, that's what this should be about, where Russ changes the tempo of the game. He changes the style of the game. He puts them into a position where, okay, maybe Jokic was being more of a facilitator for the first few minutes of the game. Now he's going to be a scorer because Russ is going to force feed him and they're going to play fast. They're going to try to really just demolish you with their speed. And maybe the actual real response to this is that Jamal Murray should be the first guy to exit. Because it was Christian Braun in the case in this last game multiple times. But I think maybe what makes sense actually is for Jamal Murray to be the guy to exit at around the 7-minute mark, the 6-7 minute mark, and then for him to come back in at about the 3-minute mark and he does his normal stagger at that point. So will be interesting to find out. Will be interesting to see. But I'm looking forward to seeing how Michael Malone handles it because it is an interesting conversation, man. It really is interesting. Nina Slav says CB is not a $30 million a year player. His best is a 16 to 20 a year, like Bogey or Dante DiVincenzo. I understand that perspective. I understand that line of thinking. It's not true anymore because the salary cap just keeps going up, and you have to do it by percentage of the cap. When Bogdan signed his deal, it was a little bit different. And he just, like, he's not a guy who handles a whole bunch of starting minutes like Christian is doing. DiVincenzo, like, his is a value contract. Like, he probably, when he's at his peak, should be paid like $18 million a year, kind of getting up into that range. Christian, I think, still has a ceiling to get to. The fact that he is playing this well this early is notable to me. If I go to, let's look at Dante DiVincenzo and what he was doing in his third season, because I remember that being his breakout with the Bucks. Dante DiVincenzo that year was averaging 10 points per game, 10 points, 5.8 rebounds, 3.1 assists. This year, Christian is averaging 15 a night. Like, he's already kind of at that place where he's a trusted piece for what the Nuggets are doing. And the efficiency with which he's playing is crazy. Like, I do think that he is, like, he might be way better than that. So kind of, it's a fascinating dynamic, but like, we're going to find out. It's going to be very interesting to see how this handles. Slav asks, how do you think the CBA will affect players' salaries since we have to pay others? It's a great question. I think that once they have to pay Christian Braun, once they have to pay Peyton Watson, if they decide to do that, they're probably going to have to let go of one of Michael Porter or Aaron Gordon. That would be my expectation at that point. We'll see what it ultimately looks like, but I don't think that Denver's going to be a team that's above the second apron a whole bunch. And if you've got Murray on a big contract, if you've got Jokic on a big contract, if you've got one of Aaron Gordon or Michael Porter, you can probably afford Christian Braun, Peyton Watson, Julian Strawther, or you can afford one of those guys and Michael Porter and Aaron Gordon. So, like, it's a tough thing. They're going to have to pick and choose. You can't pay everybody, but that's just part of the song and dance. All right, final thing here before we get out of here. The power and pain of win streaks. I asked Jamal Murray yesterday, like after the game, how difficult is it to stay focused and stay locked in mentally during a win streak? He kind of took it a different direction than I thought it was going to go, but I thought this was interesting. It's going to be our toughest year. I think everybody knows we're already champs, already have a target on our back, got a lot of young guys. I'm just trying to keep the motivation. I think Pickett told me Memphis lost on the bench, and I was like, we got to win this game, and everybody was locked in, and we won that game. I think it's just those little reminders, there's so many games that we can lose track of during the season, but how it's going to go down, being in this position so many times, every game matters. This is probably one of the easier games we're going to have for the rest of the season. First one out of the break, team that's not in the playoffs, sluggish, whatever, they're going to play hard, whatever, stuff like that. We just got to be ready to play. It's not going to come down to X's and O's. It's who's more ready to play and who wants to win more. That's what I think it comes down to. So he's more talking about like the second half of the season, the post-All-Star break portion of the season, rather than just this win streak. But I'm going to apply it to win streaks too. Staying focused, staying locked in. It's really difficult to keep up good habits while you're on a win streak. That's one of the things that I've noticed is just that, like, Denver, they have never had a 10-game win streak before. They're at 9 right now. They've only ever been to 9. They've never had 10. And one of the reasons is because the focus starts to become lacking after you win, because you're just expecting for the win to happen. And sometimes you get caught. Sometimes you get caught for sure. So I'm curious to see whether they can stay focused and stay locked in during that stretch. But what you notice towards the end of these streaks is the good habits tend to erode. They tend to go away. You start losing track of your man defensively a little bit. You're not getting as high quality of shots as you were getting before. You're not running as often in transition. I think that's one of the things that I noticed about yesterday. How often did Denver actually have a transition basket? They had 15 total fast break points, despite the fact that the Hornets, they only had 10 turnovers, actually. They turned over the ball a whole bunch early, but they didn't they actually didn't let go of the rope the way that I thought that they would. So Denver's got to find more ways to run. They've got to find more ways to be dynamic, but in order to do that, you have to get stops, you have to get rebounds, and it's those details that start to erode during a win streak. So can Denver keep it going? Can they continue to find ways to make the detailed plays happen over the course of that time? Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's a good thing to keep up a long winning streak, because, hey, you're winning. You're making it easier for yourself to get a high playoff seed. That's a good thing. The Spurs never had long win streaks, like double-digit win streaks. It's not something that they ever had. They had 8-game win streaks, 9-game win streaks, 7-game win streaks, and then you lose, and then you reset your brain, and then you get another 5-game win streak. And you lose, and then you win 3 games in a row. And then you lose again, and then you win 6 games in a row. You just never have the losing streaks. They never had to do like the 15-game win streak or the 12-game win streak or anything like that. The most famous one that I can think of is the Warriors out of the break when they, in 2016, I believe they won 24, 25 games in a row. And then they lost to the Milwaukee Bucks. But Draymond Green and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson talking about they were just dragging ass right at the end of it. They could not survive. And they just finally let it go. It was just exhausting because they wanted to keep the streak up so badly. That was in the year that they won 73 games. And that was effectively just a long-ass winning streak. So the reason why the Warriors lost that, it wasn't just because LeBron was awesome in the finals. It was because the Warriors were exhausted. They were tired. They couldn't help. They played so many minutes during that regular season, just trying to keep up and be on pace for 73 wins, that they absolutely fell apart right at the end. Draymond Green, for example, in that season, he played 2,800 minutes. That's more than Jokic has ever played. Steph Curry in that season, somebody who has had injury issues for much of his career. That year, he played 2,700 minutes. It's not his most ever. He's played earlier in his career. He's played more than that, but he's never played more than that since. Klay Thompson that season. Let's just look it up because we're here. Klay Thompson that season, 2,600 minutes. One of the some of the most minutes he's ever played. Denver has to be careful through this win streak. And when Murray said, the quote that I did not include, what Murray said right at the end, he said, "That's what I think it comes down to." Quote, "I like the motivation of the team right now, just trying to get that 1 seed." Pause. Denver's not going to get the 1 seed. And if they try to get the 1 seed, they're going to hurt themselves. They're not going to be able to survive in the playoffs if they try so hard to win regular season games. They're playing 20 of their next 26 against teams that are 500 or above. They have a really hard schedule. And expecting them to try to compete for that and really try to maintain a long-ass win streak, that's not a good idea to me. So I think we already saw this from last year, how Denver was trying to keep up the pace for the 1 seed, and they went 21-6 in the final 27 games of the season last year. That hurt them. They need to go less than that. I've already talked about this before. They've got to try to win exactly 54 games, and that would put them on pace From here, they got to go 17-9 the rest of the way. That is, like, it's within reach. Don't try to hurt yourself trying to do anything crazy. I think that Denver, they got to be smarter than that. All right. Well, we will see what happens. Denver's got 9 in a row. My eyebrows are safe for now, but if they win 3 more games, then I'm going to have to do the eyebrow. I'm going to do it on this one if I have to do it, but going to have to do that, and we'll get it lined up with a barber hopefully. So we'll see what happens. But folks, I think that is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Next Nuggets game is against Luka Doncic, LeBron James, and the Los Angeles Lakers tomorrow night. Should be very fun. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button on the way out. I will talk to you guys very, very soon.